Africa's two biggest oil producers, Nigeria and Angola, are on a contrasting debt trajectory, with Nigeria's ballooning while Angola is seeing a fall in its debt, according to the World Bank. This was disclosed in the World Bank's Africa Pulse report, which is a biannual analysis of the near-term macroeconomic outlook for the region, published around the World Bank, IMF spring and annual meetings each April and October. Each issue also includes a special focus on a particular development challenge that's shaping Africa's economic future. And that challenge for the World Bank was debt. Here's an excerpt from the report on Nigeria's debt, where the World Bank said that, and here is the quote, public debt in Nigeria is a concern. The combination of low production in the oil industry and unsustainable subsidies is one of the main obstacles to attaining debt sustainability. Joining us to discuss that, plus a host of headwinds facing Nigeria's economy, Mr. Kunle Lebetu, who is the former chair of KPMG Africa and former senior partner of KPMG Nigeria. Good morning, sir. Very great to have you. Last time we had you was Independence Day last year.
Absolutely.
We had great discussion about Nigeria. So
absolutely.
We are very welcome, sir.
Thank you.
What do you make of that World Bank quote? Let's start with Nigeria's debts. I mean, what's your take on that?
You know, debt in itself for a country is not a bad thing.
Right.
So long as the debt is focused on developing the country and especially driving infrastructure investment, mainly capital expenditure.
Yeah.
If you use debt to do that, what happens is that you then expand the economy, you create more jobs, you drive GDP growth rate, and therefore there's more cash flow from taxes paid by companies, taxes paid by workers, and the government, the fiscal revenues of the country increase. And those revenues can then be used to service the debt.
Yeah.
The challenge is if you take on debt and use debt for consumption, then you're dead in the water, in effect. And of course, if you see the quote from the World Bank about unsustainable subsidies, so subsidies, borrowing to feed consumption, those two are in itself a combination for a disaster, in effect. So I think, I don't think we should sort of overinflate the fact that debt is our main problem. Our main problem, of course, is things like poverty and unemployment, And even when we had the recession and then followed by the pandemic, our government was trying to push more taxes. But as companies made less profits and companies were shutting down, the pool of tax revenues available to the country was less. And it's not fault of a company if I can't afford to produce at a competitive price to remain afloat. And so the only way you can really drive fiscal revenues, you have to grow the economy. And you have to grow this economy by 7-8% per annum continuously.
Wow.
Yeah, if you do that continuously for 6-7 years, you double GDP. If you do that as well continuously for more than 10 years, you will lift many more people out of poverty.
Right.
And many more people have incomes. And people always forget that, look, the primary income payer is income tax.
Right.
And then there's corporate taxes.
Yeah.
And then there's and then there's VAT. In fact, VAT is probably the best tax you can have in any economy because it's easy to collect in Nigeria, and 70% of VAT goes to state governments. So, if I was Minister of Finance, over the next 3 to 5 years, I'll be increasing VAT while reducing corporate taxes and reducing income taxes.
Okay.
Because if you create more jobs and more people are spending, more people are consuming, then the VAT revenues are going to go up, and that will go straight. Most of it will go straight to state governments. So we have to find a fiscal balance that will drive activity in the economy. If you reduce corporate income taxes, for example, many more companies hopefully will have more cash to reinvest back. Because when companies make profit, the first thing they must do is pay taxes before they pay dividend. Okay? So after they pay taxes, do they have anything left to pay dividend? Now, if they pay lower taxes, they can pay more dividend. If they pay lower taxes, they can pay more dividend. They can even put some money aside for expansion. To build the next factory or to build the next production line. What does that do? Creates employment. So we have to find a way to drive economic activity in the country to the point where 7-8% per annum, we are creating jobs, we're reducing poverty, we're reducing unemployment, we're increasing VAT revenues in particular, even at a higher rate, because Nigeria has one of the lowest VATs across the continent.
That was my next question.
I think Ghana is like 14%.
Right.
South Africa is probably in that range as well. So we have scope to keep on pushing our VAT to like 10-12% over a period of time. So we need to have a different fiscal strategy around how we drive economic activity. We allow businesses to invest and grow. But the biggest challenge we also have in Nigeria is that if you look at the current inflation rates we have today, it's mainly cost-push inflation, driven by high energy prices on the one hand, driven by supply chain shocks from the Ukraine war as well as the pandemic.
Yeah.
Okay, and the fact that we don't produce enough of what we consume.
Yeah.
So we're still heavily import dependent on what? Petroleum products.
Yes.
Wheat, rice, raw sugar, and XYZ.
Yeah.
And some other things, cars and so on and so forth. So long as you continue to import those things and you cannot replace them with domestic production, you are the vagaries of cost plus inflation imported from overseas.
Yeah.
Now, my view is that if you want to produce a large scale, you need to do it in such a way that the unit cost of production will be so low that not only can you produce for the local market, you can be export competitive.
Okay, yes.
You have to be export competitive if you want to have very low unit costs. And therefore you can really have, for example, it's like cement, for example, over the years. The capacity of the cement production in Nigeria has gone from 1 million tons maybe 20 years ago. We are producing almost 30, 40 million tons today. Okay, so the same thing has to happen in many sectors.
Yeah.
And to do that, you need to encourage to have lower interest rates for people to borrow, for example. We need to have a system that encourages exports.
Okay.
Our country is mainly an import-dependent country,
right,
so all our ports are focused on imports.
Yeah.
If you want to export a container, from what I gather, I'm not an exporter. Okay. A container might sit in the port for 6 weeks before they clear it.
Right.
So we don't even have an export drive to make export really, really meaningful for our country. The only export we are doing successfully is human capital.
Okay,
human capital.
So this I'm so glad we have you. This is so much said there. With respect, I want to ask you about the in inflation challenges, the informal economy. What you talked about, raising taxes and so on, getting more into the tax basket. Do you see any challenges with trying to formalize the informal economy with so many workers that are not paying taxes and are not being captured in it? Is that, how do you see that working out for?
I don't think you can formalize the informal sector overnight, because the informal sector will say, what's the benefit of me becoming formal?
Yeah.
If I can operate under the radar and make more money than I need to make, why should I become formal? Okay. However, if you take certain sectors, if you look at agriculture, and a lot of the food that we consume that's produced in Nigeria is produced by farmers and then obtained by various middlemen who will then bring it into big towns like Lagos, into the big markets, wholesale markets. Half of it may even not disappear on the way. Half of it may expire before it gets to the consumer.
Yeah.
We should have a functioning commodities exchange. So commodities exchange is not just an exchange in one place. It will have silos, it will have warehouses, all kinds of linkages. So that when a farmer wants to produce, he knows that if I produce more than what I have capacity for, I can get better prices.
Yeah.
Okay? If I use fertilizer, I can get better yield on the same quantum of land. So at the end of the day, it has to be worthwhile the farmer. But he has to be sure that if he produces, you get a good price.
Yeah.
And that stuff will probably get into a silo or a warehouse and eventually get to the end user. So we need to have a much more robust agri-based system, part of our economy, that feeds the industry and feeds the consumer. Now, if you do that, and you have many more people making more money in the little towns and villages, both large-scale farmers and small-scale farmers, and the food can get to the city at a much lower price because it's more efficient and there's logistics and there's infrastructure and there's surplus for export, then we're talking about how we can fix inflation.
Right.
Then we can talk about how the informal sector becomes much more relevant to the economy.
Yeah.
And really and truly, at the end of the day, what makes somebody become formal is when you have to pay a utility bill. You have to pay an electricity bill, you have to pay a phone bill, you have to pay a land use charge. All those things suddenly make you formal. So once those guys have extra income and they want to own a small home, they have to pay electricity bill.
Right.
You may be prepared, but they have a meter. You may be XYZ, that is how you then become formal at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And their business too, if they want to access credit, they have to become formal. And if they find that they access credit and they pay it back and the business is expanding and growing, then they come back for more credit, then they become formal.
Gotcha. Okay.
So there's a sequence of events that moves informal to informal.
Speaking of sequence to events, you mentioned power. In our last segment, we were just talking about the historic listing of Geregu on the exchange, the critical role that power plays in bringing down costs. Can you speak to the power challenges that we've had so far and how that feeds into the solutions that you're talking about?
I mean, there are challenges along the entire power value chain, whether it's at the level of distribution or it's generation, but in between is transmission. And I don't know why we've taken so long to invest in that transmission network. Yeah. It's old. It needs to be expanded. It needs to be made available to all parts of the country. It needs to be able to carry at least 30,000 megawatts of power.
Yeah.
Today, when it gets to 5,500 megawatts, system collapse. It doesn't make sense. Yeah. Even if you want to say you want to have mini grids around the country, but that mini grid, if you have a surplus power here, you have a use here, you still need to connect them somehow.
Right.
You get a point. So I know the government has a Siemens program, and that Siemens program is supposed to expand the grids about 7,500 megawatts in the first instance, and ultimately take us to 15,000 megawatts in a couple of years. But I get the feeling that it's a slow, painstaking process. And the economy can't wait.
Yeah, right.
If our government either concession the network or get private sector to inject capital into it, I mean, government, senior governor had approval to set up something called InfraCorp.
Yeah.
If you inject $2 billion into it, bring in an operator, and quickly roll out that network in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And every year we're seeing incremental increase in the network. And the second thing is that over the years, consumers have not been used to paying electricity bills.
Excellent point.
Yeah,
yes.
over the years.
Yeah.
But again, you're telling that how many hours of power do I have?
Right.
I use my generator more than I use electricity. So if they now get more power regularly, and they're not using generator, then if they don't want to pay, then you hit them.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And finally, of course, in the power business, my understanding of the power business that people who use power, the more they use power, the lower unit cost of kilowatt hours that they pay.
Yeah.
You and I, we only use power when we get home from work. We just switch on all the appliances. Yeah. When we go to bed at night, we shut down all appliances.
Right.
And then we use it again in the morning before we leave home. Whereas factories use power 24/7.
Right.
So in most countries, the tariff for power for factories is lower than tariff for consumers.
Gotcha.
Well, I think Nigeria is the other way around today.
Right.
So there's too many problems that need to be fixed.
You see, that's why we have here. You mentioned you used the word quickly in terms of getting these policy reforms. Why do you think we don't move fast enough? Because so many of these issues, I think a year ago, we had you on Independence Day a year ago, we're talking about these issues. What are the hindrances to moving faster? Is it a strategy problem? Is it, what do you think it is?
It's a word called bureaucracy.
Right.
Even in private sector, we have bureaucracy. And if you have bureaucracy in the public sector and red tape, then really, with bureaucracy and red tape, you can't move as quickly as you would have if you don't have bureaucracy and red tape. Okay, so that's one. I think that, the other thing also is that we have not made the country as attractive enough for private sector investments, whether foreign or local. Yeah. Because if companies have invested their own capital and they're risking their capital to do something in the country, whether domestic investor or local investor, he's not going to hang around waiting for XYZ to happen. If he suddenly cannot produce, if he cannot sell what he wants to produce locally, can he export it? He will export it. Right. You get a point. So the ability to be able to switch from one idea to another idea has to happen if you want to make a country grow. Okay? But secondly also, if you find what it is that makes you very competitive, you stay at it. Right. You keep making yourself in that area more and more competitive. Then you attract more and more investment in that sector continuously. Look at the car industry, auto industry. In Africa, you have two major manufacturers, Morocco and South Africa. Yeah. Morocco produces maybe 500,000 cars a year, and maybe 80% goes into Europe because the two bigger producers are Peugeot and Renault. Right. Okay. South Africa produces 600,000 cars per annum. Half of these cars are exported. See how far SA is from the rest of the world. Of course, yeah. I hear that the right-hand drive cars in the C-Class Mercedes-Benz and the 3 Series are all made in South Africa. Because why? They made it attractive enough for those guys to come and set up. And they give them tax incentives, and labor is cheap, and they're highly skilled, and therefore they can produce those cars. Yeah. And then the balance of the cars that they produce in the market is sold locally because what? There's an auto finance industry. Right. There's no country in the world where car manufacturers produce cars and consumers use cash to buy the car. Gotcha. Nowhere. Right. It's consumer credit. Right. Gotcha. So if you have a job and you have access to credit, you walk into a dealer shop, they tell you based on your income, this is what you can, this kind of car you can drive. Excellent. You take it away, and then you pay monthly. So there is an architecture that's required. Yeah. Whether it's auto finance or housing finance that will drive economic growth. Yeah. One big driver of growth is housing.
Can you actually hold that thought? We're going to keep you on, please, sir. We're going to just take a quick break and we'll be right back. It's the Global Business Report here on Horizon. We'll continue our special conversation on Nigeria's economy right after the break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Global Business Report on the Rise News. We continue our conversation with Mr. Kunle Elebute, former chair of KPMG Africa, former senior partner of KPMG Nigeria. Thank you so much for sticking around, sir. You made a good point right before we went to the break, talking about if you have a job, the auto finance industry and liquidity needed their jobs. I just want to touch on that. Nigeria's unemployment figure, 33%, but that was as of Q4 2020. We haven't gotten updated figures then. Youth unemployment, I wanted you to talk about, I guess, your views on how we can alleviate this unemployment situation and try to get Nigeria more productive and put the youth to work.
So we need to say, where are the labor-intensive sectors? What are the sectors that will drive, employment because they need labor? Because the more manufacturing companies become highly automated and highly sophisticated, they produce more with less people. Okay. But there are certain sectors, for example, tourism. Tourism is a huge employer of labor, but we don't have advantage in Nigeria for tourism. So let's pack that.
Okay.
Housing is a big employment of labor because not only just you need workers to build houses, but all the components required for the houses, all the things that will be inside the houses will be manufactured by manufacturers, all the white goods and electronics inside the house, for example, and the various skill sets, the tiler, the plumber, the welder, all these things. That's why in most economies, every quarter they say, how many houses do we build next quarter?
All right.
Because housing starts to drive economic growth. Okay. Now, of course, unlike in China today, where they build much more than they require, or like in Dubai, when they had a housing bubble, fine.
Right.
But here today, you have 9 million Nigerians who are paying their monthly pension.
Yeah.
It means they have an income.
Right.
Okay. If you assume that half of them don't have homes and they're all renting, assume, and you want to give them maybe 10 million or 20 million each over a 10-year period, do the maths. That's 2, 3, 4 trillion.
Right.
Additional growth into the economy. That's for the housing alone, then the components. And you see, the other thing about housing is that beyond even just providing financing, it creates a level of discipline in the homeowner.
Yeah.
And homeowners suddenly realize that I now have an asset that has value.
Yeah.
I have to change the way I spend my money because I have to meet my monthly payments. But most importantly, if you see the large amount of people, Nigerians out there who don't have a job, what skills do they have? So what would it take? What would it take to get these guys over a 6-month period to go and train to become whatever they need to become to enter that in the industry? Okay, and in construction industry, we have enough Nigerians here. If you train them, that you don't have to import workers. If they want to build a house in Lagos, you bring tilers from Togo. You bring this person. You want to build a road, you bring Chinese workers. It doesn't make sense when you have people who are unemployed. And then of course another thing, of course, is another industry. I'm just looking at the picture now. Is garments.
Right.
We have cotton. We have textile industries that are not competitive, but we don't have a garment industry.
Right.
Okay, so the whole value chain is from cotton to textile to garment. And if you have a garment industry, what does that do? All your small shop tailors in the corner who, when you take your clothes to sew, they say, "Oh, I don't have light to come back in a week's time."
Exactly.
And then you go, if you have that kind of setup, it drives retail.
Yeah.
Okay, because then if you and I want to buy a suit or a shirt or want to buy an agbada, I go to a shop. And I pick it up. So in India, for example, they have 400 million people in middle class.
Huge.
Those people go to the shops, to the massive retail outlets to go and buy what they want to wear, what they want to eat, X, Y, Z. So all these things are interconnected.
Yeah.
You own a home. You want to fix the home. You go into a shop where you go and buy all the home appliances. Yeah. What does that do? It creates employment. Now, a manufacturer of any item, if he sees that the growth of what he's selling in that country is growing exponentially, he might suddenly say, what? Why don't I go and set up a factory there and produce?
Right.
Because if I set up a factory there and produce, I'm able to create more markets than before.
Exactly.
And in fact, if I also expand a factory, maybe I can export to surrounding countries. So that's the way all these global players think.
Yeah.
But they want to see sustainable policies. They want to see a stable exchange rate.
Yeah.
They want to see attractive interest rates. They want to see adequate security. I want to see a skilled labor force. So we know what the building blocks are. Just take each building block and say, what do you need to fix those building blocks? And then keep at it.
Right.
If you do that for the next 5 to 10 years, then you see,
It's so pertinent that you mentioned India. Apple is looking at setting up to build iPhones in India and a lot of its products there. You mentioned the stable exchange rate and interest rates. The exchange rate situation in Nigeria, how do we alleviate that, you think, where things are?
Well, so long as, that you have more demand for the FX than supply, the rate will not, it just won't stabilize.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you get a point. And why do we have more demand than supply? Because we are importing too many things that we ought to be doing locally. I understand that a large portion of what we use FX for is to import petroleum products, so that we don't have petrol queues. Now, if you start refining petrol locally and kerosene and AGO locally, then we'll stop importing them. Okay? If you're able to start producing wheat or other substitute grains, you get a point. If you start, producing more than enough raw sugar, these things take time, though.
Of course.
These things take time.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is that even if it takes time, we have to just keep at it. Now, what other things can we do to even increase the supply of FX? So all of a sudden now, with the problems in Russia and Ukraine, and supply of gas into Europe, means that Europe is looking for other gas supplies. Gas supplies.
Right.
So the pipeline from Nigeria to Algeria to go to Europe, before now wasn't bankable. I hear all of a sudden now it become bankable.
Right.
You can take a pipeline to Algeria, you can take a pipeline via the west coast to Morocco, and feed gas into Western Europe. What does that do for you? It hopes to expand your export revenues.
Yeah.
So you have to do both. Look for ways of export, and then you also say, what industries should we even support to be able to become major exporters? So to give another example, hides and skins that are produced in northern Nigeria.
Yeah.
And some of the 2 or 3 major factories that do the major. I don't know what the numbers are, but maybe $500 million, $8 million a year. Those hides and skins find their way to Morocco. When they get to Morocco, they're processed into leather which they use for shoes. It goes into Europe. And they say the shoes are from Moroccan leather. But the raw material came from northern Nigeria. Right. Okay. Now our brothers in Aba who are producing shoes, and then they produce, 100,000 pairs of shoes a month, export to the West Coast. Raw materials for those shoes, imported from where? China. So here's a hub exporting shoes. It may be informal sector. Here's another hub that produces hides and skins. They're not communicating.
Right.
These guys are taking it offshore to Morocco. These guys are importing from China to produce for Nigeria and for the West Coast. So connect them together. Let the guys find a way to finance the raw materials into the Aba rather than bringing in raw materials from China. Get them to give more capacity to produce much more lighter mass of shoes. Look, Nike doesn't produce one shoe.
Right.
Nike outsources the production of all the shoes.
Vietnam and all these
wherever.
other countries.
So in most countries, you go to those guys and say, what will it take for you to go and set up a factory to produce? If you don't want to, we can set up a factory to produce shoes. But what does it take? What are the standards? What are the quality? What are the skills? What is the technology that's required? And then you find investors who will put money into that kind of factory. And you produce
together.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So my final question, we're about out of time. You've mentioned consistently during this interview that these things are going to take time. We have, I don't want to bring you into politics, but we have an election coming up. There's new leadership. How will whoever comes in be able to successfully tell Nigerians that we're going to need time for these new reforms, whatever they are, to take effect? Is it a communication thing or?
No, I think that whatever government comes in has to be realistic. A lot of times when we do some work for government, they tell you they're in a hurry. I keep telling you, things are not, even businesses are not built in a hurry.
Right.
Okay, so I don't know why government can think they can run faster than businesses. Right. But the thing about it is that even if you pick 1 or 2 things you want to do, keep at it. The challenge I also have is that when somebody starts something in 4 years, if it doesn't continue for another 4 years, somebody else comes in and says, this is not my policy. Right. Let me set my own policy. So we have policy inconsistency. We don't hold it right through to the end. You get a point. And just improve on making those policies much more attractive than before. If you do that alone, then I think we'll be on the right track.
What's your outlook for the Nigerian economy, short term, long term? Are you optimistic that things will work out?
I can't see how they're going to work out in any manner. You see, for me, 3% growth rate is not real growth rate. So I think we'll see continue trending at 3%, 3.5%. That's not growth rate for us. We need to jumpstart the economy to 7-8% per annum. Right. And I can't see that happening between now and the election next year.
So it's always a pleasure having you on the show, Mr. Kunle Ilebute, former chairman of KPMG Africa, former senior partner KPMG Nigeria. Always a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.